Alright, I've done a bunch of other videos talking about what to do with files from file upload questions on Microsoft Forms. And one question that comes up a lot is around the names of those files, because we'll just jump in and take a look at an example of the problem. So when you have a form, the default settings are to record the name. So when you go into the settings for your form, there's a checkbox for record name. And if you have that checked, whenever someone submits a form and attaches a file to a file upload question, their name is going to be inserted into the file name, or I should say at the end of the file name. So sandwiched in between the file extension and the original name is an underscore followed by their display name. Now, some people have said, well, I told it not to record the name, so they go in and they uncheck record name, and the problem is then that it still appends something, but what it appends is underscore anonymous, which is arguably even less useful than the name, and probably not what you want either. But we have the benefit here is that we can see that there is a consistent format to how or I should say, how Microsoft Forms and Microsoft 365 are handling this. So they're always putting the original file name, an underscore, and then the display name or the word anonymous, and then the file extension. So we have a consistent, once we know that pattern, we can basically use the pattern to dissect the file name and rebuild it in the form that we want. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to split the file name into some different components. We're going to extract the parts we need and then reassemble it into a clean file name. And then we'll talk, I have other videos where we talk about what you can do with that file name, but basically in this video all we're going to be talking about is just cleaning up that file name to remove the underscore and the submitter name. Now, it sounds like it should be really simple, like just, hey, remove submitter name. But like a lot of things in Power Automate, we need to take this piecemeal. So we need to break it down into some smaller components. Let me just zoom in here so you'll be able to see things a little better. But first thing we want to do is just so we know what's going on here, I like to use a lot of compose steps, especially as you're learning to do these things. In the end, you'll be able to kind of condense things into just one or two composes, or even skip the composes altogether and just put the formula that you come up with into the place you want it. But while you're learning, it's really helpful to do this in little tiny chunks so that you get familiar with what's actually happening. So the first thing I'm going to do here is we're going to get the original file name, so just the name of the file. And again, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that anytime we're working with a file upload question on the form, we need to get the response details. We then need to parse the JSON of the file upload question, and that's going to produce a JSON array with properties like the name, the link, the other bits and pieces. I'm not going to go into details on it, but basically what we're concerned with here is just the name. So we've got this parse JSON, which is going to produce an array of JSON data, which is the body. So we're just using an apply to each on the body of the parse JSON action. And we need the apply to each because this is always going to be an array. All right, so the first thing we want to do is just compose the original file name. So I have a compose step here that I renamed compose original file name, and then I'm just going to plug in name. That's it, which is from the parse JSON. So if I hit save, now I've already run this a few times, so we can just rerun a previous run to see what's happening. There we go, should be done in just a second or two. There we go, ran successfully. So if we look at our original file name, there is the file that was uploaded. So task management in Office 365 by Anonymous. Great. So this is what we're working on. Basically what we're going to do is write some expressions to pull out. The end result is going to be removal of this underscore anonymous. But again, we need to do it in pieces. So the first thing we're going to do is just extract the file extension. And this is important because unless you're restricting them to a particular type of file, it could be a Word document, it could be Excel, it could be whatever. So you need to get that file extension out so that you can then plug it back in at the end to make it a usable file. So we're going to use the split expression here, and split is basically going to take a string. Back over here. Split converts a string into an array of elements. So in this case, we're going to take the string of that file name and split it into an array of elements. Now, split requires the text that you're going to split and a delimiter, or what character you want to split on. Now, we know that the file name is always, the file extension is always going to have a period or a dot before it. So that's what we're going to use as our delimiter. So we could simply go into our expression and say split. Now, one thing you'll notice is that when you go to dynamic content, you won't see the same information that we had in here, but that's okay. What we need, if we hover over this, we can see that it's items apply to each attachment name, but we can actually simplify that to simply item, which means the current item, and the name. So we'll just put in the expression item, question mark, square bracket, name, there. So we want to split the name property on the period. Now the problem with this is that it's going to return an array. What we want, because we know that that period is going to be, the file extension is going to be at the end, so what we want is the last. If it's splitting that file name into, let's say there are 5 periods, it's going to split it into 6 chunks, each one of them separated by a period. So what we want is the last one of those, because that's going to be the file extension. So we just, before the split here, we put in last and then close the parenthesis and click OK, and we'll save that, run it. Here we go. So we now know that the file extension is pptx. Perfect. That's all we need. Now, it'd be nice if we could also get the period, but we can easily plug that back in later. So as long as you're getting the correct file extension, you're in good shape. All right. So now the next expression we're going to talk about is lastIndexOf. And basically what this is going to do is give us the last position. So indexOf, lastIndexOf is a variant of that. IndexOf gives you the position of a character in a string. So if you want to find the letter A, you would say indexOf the string name and then the letter A, and it would tell you what number position the letter A appears in. lastIndexOf, and that's starting from the beginning of. If you do lastIndexOf, then it's going to basically start at the end of the string and count backwards, or search backwards to find that string. So it's going to give you the last position, which for us is useful because what we want is the last position of an underscore character. Why is it important to get the last position? Because what if someone uses an underscore in the file name itself? I know I personally use lots of underscores in file names because it prevents spaces, and I'm weird like that. I don't like spaces in file names. But the point is, you can't control how many underscores they use, but you know for a fact that the last underscore in the file name is going to have the submitter's name after it, so that's what we're going to use. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump over here, and the last underscore, we'll just erase my placeholder text there, and go over to our expressions, and we will type in lastIndexOf, and again we'll use item name. And what are we searching for? Underscore. Okay. Let's save this and run it again. Success. So this is telling us that the last underscore is in position 29. It's character number 29. All right. So now the fun part. Next thing we want to do is substring, or next formula expression we're going to use is substring, which is going to return a portion of a string based on a start position and a number of characters, or an index. So basically in our case what we're going to say is give me the name, return the substring from that original file name starting at position 0, ending at the last index of the underscore character. So not terribly complicated. Again, we're just doing this piecemeal just to make sure we understand how all this works. I could just give you the answer, but then you wouldn't really learn much. So here we go. So let's go to substring, and we want the substring of what? We want of the original file name. That's item, question mark, square bracket, name. All right. Start index. So where are we starting from? We're starting from the beginning of the file name, 0. Easy enough. And the length. So technically that's the number that we got out of compose last index of last underscore. So I could basically say, yeah, give me that. So that's going to return a number. Or if we wanted to do away with this step entirely, what we would do is basically take this expression, copy that, and we'll use it in here. So again, I need to start with the substring again because I went out of that. So substring of item, name, starting at 0, ending at that. Because remember that last index is returning a number, which is the position of the underscore. And we OK, and we hit save. Test this. And I know we're doing a test every single time. I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm trying to make sure we all know what's going on here. So this is going to give me the file name without the extension or the submitter name. Beautiful. So now, effectively, because I've put this formula into here, I can delete this compose and be done with it. So I don't need that. And also you could, as we'll show in a minute, we're going to compose a new file name. We can eliminate this compose file extension too. So basically, once you understand this, you can collapse these by basically replacing them, replacing the calls to that other actions output in the formula itself. But it's useful to me to demonstrate how this all goes together. So now the new file name is going to be this, because we know that's composing the file name without the extension or submitter name. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to select all of that, and we'll just plug that whole thing into here. And OK. Now we need to put the file name back on there. I'm sorry, the file extension back on there, because if we just use that name without a file extension and you're attaching it as an email attachment or attaching it to a SharePoint list item, it's not going to know what kind of file it is. So we need to put a period. Now I'm going to go back up to our file extension formula here, and that is going to be that. So in here we'll do expression, paste that in, and there we go. So now we can essentially get rid of this because we put that formula in here. We can get rid of this because we put that formula in here. So let's just clean things up. Delete, delete, and hit save. And we only needed, I only put this compose original file name in to show what we were starting with. But let's test this one last time to be sure it worked exactly the way we want. And there we go, finished. So our original file name, task management Office 365 underscore anonymous.pptx, new file name, task management in Office 365.pptx. So beautiful. Now, what can you do with that new name once you've got it? Basically, whatever you want or need to do with it. If you're using a flow to attach this file to an email, then you would just simply use the output of that compose action as the file name when you're attaching that email, or to a list item, etc. Or you could even go back and update the properties of the file in OneDrive or SharePoint, whether it's a personal or group form, to replace that ugly name with a clean name. So what you do with it from this point on depends on what your requirements are. So hopefully this was useful to you. I know it took a little longer than I wanted it to, but I wanted to be sure everyone understood what was going on there. So hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments below. I'll also include in the description those particular formulas that I used, just so that you can, or the expressions that I use rather, so that you can copy and paste them into your flows. All right, thanks and have a great day.